So, Racer Magazine's very own Paul Pfanner, if you could describe our breakfast together in one word, what would it be?
Enthralling.
There it is.
That works. And then the music cues and the whole thing.
Which we still haven't picked out.
Yeah, we haven't even started that part of the deal yet.
I like
It's going
Ride
up
of the
in a month.
Valkyries.
Can we
Yeah.
get that?
I'm pretty sure licensing might be a challenge on that one.
How about Muskrat Love?
If I was born in the 20s, I would know.
And now for Dinner with Racers, presented by
Continental Tire.
with your hosts, Ryan Eversley and Sean Heckman.
Placeholder radio sound. I'm a driver. I'm very angry. This is the sound of a driver on the radio during a race.
What do you think I should order?
And Dinner with Racers continues. I am Sean Heckman.
And I am Ryan Eversley.
And welcome to our little podcast series. We are wrapping up our travels across the country as we speak. We are a couple hundred miles outside of Atlanta, somewhere in northern Florida.
That's right.
And what's the car that we're in?
We are in my Acura MDX.
Interesting. And I feel like the car might be on Continental Tires.
It is on
Weird.
Continental Tires.
So anyway, we are wrapping up a 30-day road trip that went, how many miles on there?
8,000 miles
Yeah.
across 20 states.
Wow. All to meet up with about 27 of what we thought would be interesting people in racing.
That's right.
That we in turn give to you for free, and then you shit on.
And make fun of us on Twitter.
So next in our list is a guy who I don't understand why he would take the time to meet with us.
Who is this?
Paul Pfanner.
Oh, yeah. True gentleman.
So Paul Pfanner, if you don't know who he is a truly successful business guy within the sport. Currently running Racer Magazine and Racer.com, but between that and his company, Pfanner Communications, has been a player in the sport for a long time. Not a celebrity, not a driver, not a team owner, but a guy who has kind of been in touch with every facet of the sport for decades. So we thought it'd be cool to meet up with him. We were in Southern California anyway. So Paul Pfanner has a lot of insight. Anything you learned from it?
I was really impressed by his knowledge of the sport and then the way he looked at different things. Totally gave me a different direction to think about stuff inside from the business. And then he also talked about his driver coach, which was Mike Hull from Chip Ganassi Racing. Really cool to get some insight on him as well.
A lot of cool stories, really good sense of humor, really interesting guy to talk to, and good for you to know kind of some of the people behind the scenes that really make the sport work. So we went down to Tustin, California in Orange County.
Yeah, I had the, what was the name of the restaurant?
Citrus Cafe.
Citrus Cafe, really cool place. I had the California fruit bowl with granola.
I had a chicken sandwich, and we had a delightful conversation, which you can hear now, courtesy
Of Continental Tire.
All right, we're going to start in 5, 4, 3, 2.
Hey, Paul, how are you? Good to see you.
Hey, nice to see you. Grab a headset. And then you will want to, there's a mic on your right there, and you want to kind of pull that down and then kind of angle it towards your mouth.
Okay, I feel like Roger Penske.
Yeah. Minus the money. So we're driving in, and there's plenty of things that we can all talk about, but I think the number one thing on our mind was there was a new article that was just posted on Racer today about a new appointee at IndyCar.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, we weren't on the first forum comment, and it was already starting to go downhill.
Yeah.
And that made us think of my absolute favorite Racer article that was ever posted. Not because the article itself was very mundane. It was about the banquet for this year's IndyCar finale.
Yes.
And we're not one comment in, and it just immediately went to hell about a banquet that no one was going to.
This is something that's come up actually in a couple interviews and over conversation with Sean and I, because he really thinks this is, I mean, and I agree. I actually looked it up today for the first time.
Yeah.
And of course you were right. But the first real comment is typical IndyCar, they're too big for their britches. They think people in San Francisco actually care about a banquet. It's like, let it go, man.
Well, what I love is the eternal optimism and positivity.
right. That's what the internet's known for.
Yeah, well, especially our forums.
Yeah, it's well, here we've got it right here. Like, what is the very first forum comment that comes up on an article about the IndyCar banquet, which, keep in mind, a banquet is not something that the general public typically goes to. It is just for people, within the series.
Yeah.
And, in our history, a banquet is usually geocentric to where the season finale is at so that people don't have to leave.
That's right.
So San Francisco kind of made sense since it was in Sonoma. And the very first forum comment was, sounds very boring. And the second forum comment is, typical IndyCar, they are too big for their britches. They think people in San Francisco actually care about a banquet. Have it in Indy where it will actually register on the local landscape. So I guess this would be my first comment. I mean, you, I assume, look at Racer more from a kind of a global view since you're not really writing too many articles yourself. Do you guys look at this and just enjoy how fun it can get when it goes really, really south really fast?
Yeah, and I think that we have contributors, that write for the magazine and write for the website,
right.
That we pay, and then there's this cadre of, they're from lawless tribal regions of Kartganistan, and they're going to get even for the split, and they show up on our forums,
right.
And they used to, I think, inhabit crapwagon.com, and now they
right.
found us.
Right.
Yeah.
So they're looking for a date, and they're constantly on the forums. And
do you remember when Champ Car ended 7 years ago?
It hasn't ended for these people. They're like the Japanese soldier on the island fighting World War II 22 years after hostilities ended.
I'm waiting for the Champ Car will rise again mantra,
The Panos DP07 or
Still a thing.
It is amusing. I think that we've actually had readers that are sincerely trying to discuss topics that are in the stories complain to us that this has just gotten out of hand. So we've ordered airstrikes. Some of
Which
them
makes sense.
using unmanned drones.
Drones,
So,
drones.
be warned.
Yeah, it's the only way.
Be warned, Bigger 51, wherever you are.
Right. And it's almost like, this isn't necessarily an IndyCar specific podcast. It by no means is actually. It's just a general racing podcast. But I'm sure we'll have some listeners that hear this and think, oh, they're talking about us. But it seems to be a very angry, generic fan base for a lot of things when it's kind of like you got what you got. Make the best of it.
Well, we see two sides of it. One, we see that IndyCar gets the most traffic. IndyCar stories traditionally the most traffic on our site.
Really?
And absolutely. It really, I think, because we have some of the very best IndyCar reporting.
Right.
Sure.
I'm proud of our team for that, and that I think our racer brand has been, has had IndyCar racing and the Indy 500 at its heart since its inception. The first issue had an IndyCar on the cover.
Right.
So we've got that going for us, and the audience, for the most part, I believe, is positive. When we meet them at events,
right,
they love IndyCar racing.
Now, so that when you meet them in person, is there anyone that's actually as bad as they are on the forums when you do meet
Only
them
a
in person?
handful, and they don't like us. They don't like the paper. Why don't we do it daily? They have.
Right.
It's just a mindset and a personality type that, for the most part, is going to just, I think, seek revenge.
Right.
And the revenge is hiding behind an anonymous screen name.
Right.
I occasionally post on these forums, and I use the anonymous screen name Paul Pfanner.
How strange.
Yes. I do that because I hold myself accountable for whatever comments.
It should. Can I make a suggestion?
Yeah.
Now, I'm a marketing genius. It should be Paul Pfanner sucks.
Or
That's
not Paul Pfanner.
Or not Paul Pfanner.
Yeah.
Twitterless Paul Pfanner.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll note that.
I'm just throwing it out there.
Okay, we're working on that. I'm going to try to get a trademark on that. Hashtag.
Right.
And I'm going to spell sucks. SUX. Just
Exactly.
to make it brandable.
It's hip.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
For sure. So, since we're already talking about IndyCar, we were led down a road that you are a big fan of Gene Simmons.
Yeah, my hero.
Right.
Chaim Witz is his real name.
Oh.
And
okay.
my love of Gene really came after his music career. I just spent 5.5 months working on a brand and positioning strategy for the IndyCar series with two really good marketers who worked there, Ken Unger and Bill Long. And
when is this? This is
2005.
early
I'd basically worked around the clock for 5 months, and we went to present this to the management of IndyCar and person who shall
And
remain.
this is through your
Pfanner
Communications, your
yes,
marketing end, right?
And I'm very proud of the work to this day, and it was done in collaboration with these two guys who are both very accomplished and have gone on to do great things elsewhere. Worked with Eric Johnson on it. Eric is communications guy at Monster now, but was the managing editor of Racer X Illustrated and Road Racer X. He had a real good understanding of youth culture. A lot of good ideas in this document, and we spent an hour presenting it, and at the end of it, a certain family member who shall remain nameless in the Holman George family,
Sure.
with a very quiet tone, said, "Paul, well, thank you. This is very nice. Thank you. Just want you to know we've hired Gene Simmons to lead our marketing going forward."
Makes sense.
So I became a fan instantly.
Right.
Because,
Absolutely.
Obviously, you just got to submit yourself to a higher power whenever presented.
Absolutely.
So any opportunity I get to celebrate Gene,
Sure.
I take.
That's it. Yeah.
Right.
I understand lost opportunities.
Fair
Yeah.
enough.
Mhm.
Fair enough.
So what's weird is his tenure didn't last very long, from what I remember, and he was supposed to be the whole new godsend of the series, as I remember.
Well, that's pretty much the case in most of these instances. I think, take Gene out of it, I honestly don't think people get given enough time
Yeah.
to do these jobs. They're complicated jobs.
Sure.
I'm a fan of the current CMO of IndyCar and Indianapolis Motor Speedway. CJ O'Donnell is truly an excellent marketer and has a great sense of brand and in communications. He's an accomplished turnaround
Right.
guy too,
Right.
from the automotive industry, and I knew him previously, and I was impressed he was chosen.
Right.
But I always worry, do these people ever get given enough time in this
Right.
impatient culture
Right.
that expects complete transformation within 18 months, or
Sure.
the next person's going to be bought in?
Exactly.
Right.
In the old days, with whether it was magazine publication or a race team, in terms of their TV presence or a magazine, the way you would sell advertising was simply based on, this is our circulation, this is what we
Right.
believe the demographic to be. But we're now in an era where tangible metrics actually apply in a way they never did before. You
Correct.
can actually say, this is how many people clicked on it, this is what region they were coming from.
Right.
Do you think that's hurting motorsports in a way?
Some forms of motorsport that were powered by bullshit.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
But other forms of motorsport are able to demonstrate the, depth of engagement and passion. And passion drivers drive all brands.
Right.
And if you have, if you will, a nest of passion drivers, which you do have in motorsports, that's why sometimes a relatively small number of core fans may be taken, they only have 35,000 people that go to the races. Well, those 35,000 people may magnify to several million
Right.
in terms of influence
Right.
if you look
Sure.
at their behaviors.
Yeah.
And where I see this opportunity too, and we're just in the beginning of it now, is direct digital distribution of content, of live event coverage, of pre-event qualifying, all these other things. We're in the infancy of those formats being embraced, and 10 years from now I think it's going to be really interesting, because most forms of sport and motorsport will likely not be watched via appointment on a television set.
So like, let's say a sports car team does like a 24-hour webcast from within their pits during the Daytona.
Right.
That would be brilliant, right? It'd be like
Right.
the most amazing thing you've ever seen.
I don't think that's what he was getting at all.
No, I'm just saying.
But I think I think you're onto something, because when I watched Le Mans,
Right.
I watched the different feeds. I set up every freaking computer while I'm watching it.
Right.
And it's a little bit like watching a war with the broadcasts from
Yeah,
the
trying to
warring
make it all happen.
countries. They're
Yeah.
all trying to make you
Get that
think
little
they're
piece.
winning.
Right.
And they're maybe
It's actually a
not.
very good way of putting it, because
Yes.
Turner does a thing as well.
Right.
Obviously, Magnus does. And to be fair, when I'm not at the track, I tune in all those.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that idea of, motorsport at its heart is conflict resolution.
Yeah.
People, and it's in any given class or race, there's one winner,
Right.
and then there are a bunch of whiners.
In racing?
Guilty.
So what you have is this competitive tension. You have all of this drama that unfolds largely out of the trying to own perception before the conflict is resolved.
Right.
And that's really where I think a great opportunity exists. And some of the most interesting forms of content, I spoke to this at the FIA Sport Conference in Mexico City in July, was some of the most compelling and engaging content is yet to be created.
Yeah.
We're only beginning. What happens when all of this plays to Oculus Rift and three-dimensional reality, where you're able to be at the event without being at the event, drive an Indy car or drive your race car, right? That somebody can experience that in a very real way. I think that's when this takes off.
Right. I agree with
I just saw this movie, basically a spy movie set in the 60s, and they go to a racetrack and there's a hospitality setup, and it's like a big deal. There's a party, everybody's drinking champagne, and no one's really focused on the race at all. And I thought, man, that's probably how it used to be, and now it's not really that way at all. It's like you said, there's as many people on the outside of the hospitality unit as on the inside. You'd probably appreciate that movie because it's very much still shows the sexy side of motorsports.
It was a great movie, A Man and a Woman. That might, I'm not sure if you've seen that, where the filmmaking, the technique was 1964, and Ford of France was involved in the making of the movie, French movie. But they go to Le Mans, and they have the camera movement and the sense of being there in the moment is very 2015.
Right.
Yet it's in black and white.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
a beautiful movie. It's about a racing driver, rally driver, Ford driver, and his romance. I think it doesn't end well, the romance, but it's this typical racing driver's fantasy life. But what was great about it was you got a sense of the cultural gravity of motorsport, this mysterious, romantic, exotic feeling that motorsport had. And now it's a race factory.
Yeah.
We're stamping out races.
Yeah.
Okay,
exactly.
which one do you want? We got a blue one, a red one, or a green one?
Again, that's another.
We got races by the dozen. Come to a race weekend. You can't hear yourself think, but there are 14 support races, each louder than the last.
Do you think racing is a little oversaturated right now?
Oh, I think there's just too much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not that there's always chance for everyone to race. I think it's great. More chances to race, but
it kind of delineates what the premier is and where this manufacturer should go.
It's a tough thing to figure out what's important and what's not anymore. And we got this business of everybody trying to take each other's stature and position, which is challenging. And I think what really hurts motorsport more than anything now is there was a time when the drivers would cross over on a much more regular basis, and there was a sense that the elite drivers in the world were truly elite because they cross-validated each other by racing in different categories, where they elevated the very elite.
Right.
And now we have this kind of brand elitism. Formula Ones are the best. Formula One drivers are the best drivers in the world.
Right.
I've never completely bought into that.
I don't believe that either. I honestly don't believe that at all.
Yeah.
But I think there's some excellent racing drivers. But what would happen if you put Sebastian Vettel in a car at Iowa in an IndyCar race?
Exactly.
Or put him in a Daytona prototype. Well, he'd actually probably drive it well. Sebastian Bourdais, but it's the same but different. I think Juan Montoya is a great barometer of all this.
Yeah, exactly.
And he is a truly great racing driver because he's embraced doing all these things.
Right.
And when I look at motorsport now, it's I'm better than you. I'm better than you. I'm better than you. Well, prove it.
Right.
A couple of that's a great thing to think about. I love watching crossovers. I was really excited when Kurt Busch did the Indy 500. I couldn't wait to see how he did, and I thought he did amazing.
He did.
And then Kyle Larson, when he did the Daytona 24-hour the last 2 years, the first year he was slow by his take. He said he was slow. He was like 0.8 off.
Yeah.
Scott Dixon, Joey Hand, some of the best sports car or road racers on the planet, and he was really disappointed in himself. And he publicly said he didn't want to go back to the 24-hour after being 0.9 off the pace of the best guys in that class in the world, which is like a lot of guys would kill to be that fast. And then this year he goes to the 24-hour and he sets the fast lap of the race.
Yeah.
And was like, okay, now I really like these things. And it's like, yeah, you found that 9/10 you were missing. And now, but it's like not very many people get to do that. And he's only done, I think, 3 road races in his career or something.
In that type of car,
In that
yes.
type of car,
And what's
exactly.
interesting is I'm still, by the way, working on that 9/10.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Hopefully, this coffee will help with one of the tenths. But the, the first race I went to with a crew pass was with Mike Hall when he
Yeah.
was racing a Formula Ford, and
What year was that?
it was February of 1973, Riverside National.
Right.
Okay.
And this is Mike Hall, who basically runs the Ganassi program, more or less.
Yep.
Empire.
And
Yeah.
Yeah.
he had a Titan Formula Ford. A friend of mine arranged the pass, and I got to know Mike over time, and so we've been friends for since then. And he sent me, we communicate occasionally on race weekends just to see how it's going. I'm a fan of Mike's and fan of the team, and he sends me a note during the first time. Kyle, he said, "This is a kick-ass race car driver."
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
so impressed, and just his ability to adapt and understand the car. And I had no idea that he had any negative feelings about his own performance. All I
Yeah.
had was, I do consider Mike to be a really good judge of talent.
Sure. Yeah, I'd
And-
say.
He's seen a few.
So far, he's okay.
The only mistake he made was me. But the reality is that we don't see enough of that, and it elevates certain racers to a different level where wherever they appear, they bring multiple fan bases, not just one fan base saying, my guy's better than yours. Basically, you build a fan of a human being with a racing
Right.
talent,
Right.
not a NASCAR's better than IndyCar,
Right.
IndyCar's better than Formula One. And I was only aware of this later in life, that there was this, sanctioning body specific
Yeah.
intent. I think Bill Simpson warned me when we were launching Racer. He says, it'll never work. He said, you got to remember all these guys from these different series hate each other, talking about the people who ran the series.
Right.
And I haven't seen that, but I haven't forgotten the advice either.
So I think we want to hear about you driving with Mike Hall.
Yeah,
Well, it's probably the greatest story never told. I was one of the top 17,000 Formula Ford drivers of the 19.
you were in the sharper end of the field.
Well, no,
Yeah.
in fairness, probably the guy number 18,000 was terrible.
Yeah,
But,
right.
yeah.
No, it like many people, you come into contact with motorsport at a young age, and my first exposure was seeing the Indy 500 on closed circuit television, and it was a tragic event. Within 2 minutes, 2 people were fatally injured. 1964 Indy 500. I was 9, and but I'm wired in a way where I just want to drive one of those.
Yeah,
right. Yeah.
So my focus was on Formula cars, and when I was just out of high school, we went down to look at a Formula Ford, and it was a Eldon Mark 10. I still have several of them.
Really? Oh, that's cool.
And I sat in the car basically, and I just remember thinking, I have to do this. This is what I'm going to do. And we worked on a little business called Braeswood Graphics, and we just made up the name because we thought it sounded sophisticated.
Right.
Something you'd hear on an FM radio station.
Prestige worldwide.
Prestige, Braeswood Graphics, solving your motorsports graphic problems. But we would do sponsorship, livery, illustrations, letterhead design. So we ended up getting a number of clients, and through one of those relationships, I met Mike and got close. I also got close to the people at a company called Automotive Development, which had selling Eldons, but they built a car called the ADF. This company eventually became Swift, and I did all the illustrations of what these cars would look like before there were CAD/CAM machines that could.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah, so that's it, and was just around this group of exceptional people that wanted to build a Formula One car, Indy car someday.
Right.
Yeah.
And was also around a lot of the people at Dan Gurney's All-Americans, American Racers, and around Don.
And that's all out here in Southern California.
Right, Don
Yeah.
Edmonds, and we're just racing was here.
Yeah.
It was in this immediate area. Just down the road was where the last Drake Engineering Offenhauser
Yeah.
place
the old
was, right
office.
behind Mazda's technical center. So everything was here, and so getting a Formula Ford was imperative. It was at a time we had 50, 60 cars running a national race at Riverside.
Right.
So I ended up going to driver school. I had help from the people at Automotive Development. Mike was supportive. He was my driving school instructor.
How'd that go?
Oh, good. I mean, he wrote in my logbook the immortal words, "Nice job on the straights."
Good between the corners.
Yeah.
But so he had a way of taming a young person's ego.
I can see him still doing that today.
Yes.
Okay.
He's the master of understatement.
So all the meanwhile, you're working on publications.
Mhm.
You know, you're starting your Formula magazine. So sort of what was the genesis towards leading to the first iteration of Racer?
Well, it started by just not getting it right with Formula, and
Understood.
And I got frustrated with it and quit in 1976 and went to work for another publishing company, and we got the sports car contract, which was one of the things I worked on doing.
Sure.
And we made sports car competitive with my former title.
Right.
And
they
of
love
course,
that.
it provided me the opportunity to drive every racing car I could get my hands on for these track tests that I
Right.
felt were essential. Most of them were
Absolutely.
Formula Fords, but I knew that there was something else out there, and we hadn't really put it together. The timing wasn't right. So over time, I left Paul Oxman Publishing, which was the publisher of sports cars, started my own company, but never gave up on the idea.
Yeah.
And that's a theme, by the way, is never give up.
Sure.
Yeah.
And just keep working on it. Every failure is a lesson in understanding how to do it properly. So,
Got a lot of those.
Yep. And we got sports car contract, and one of the first thoughts would be, when we get this stable and vibrant, we're going to go after it. So in 1987, we began work on it, and the genesis of Racer really is back in a car ride with my original partner, founder, Jeff Swart. Jeff's a director, and we were riding to our first photo shoot. I was going to get to drive a Can-Am car.
And Jeff, to put this in perspective, is now known as like the man when it comes to Porsche and
Porsche
and
commercials
photo
and
and video and
videos.
commercials.
He's just
Yeah.
an excellent driver and a great friend.
And he's a
and
great driver, yeah. He
Yeah.
does the Pikes Peak Hill
Pikes Peak
climb
guy, yeah.
successfully.
He's a terrific racer, and his shop and studio is just down the road here.
Right.
So,
Nice.
But we were riding in his 914-6, which is this nice car, and we're riding up to the race shop in Central California, where the race car we were going to mount cameras on we're going to go do an inspection of it. And we started having this conversation about, boy, what did you do? I worked on Formula. Oh, what happened with it? Someday when we're older, we have all this money that's going to come to us, we'll launch a racing magazine.
Sure.
Let's promise each other we'll do that. So after 5 years of screwing around with it, and from 87 to, well, actually 4 years to about 90, 91, we got close. We tried a couple of false starts. One was called Race Week. We had the name Driver for a while, and we settled on Racer, and that was suggested by Gordon Kirby, who was someone we worked with.
Yeah.
And it was also, one of my mentors is Nick Craw, and that was his license plate when he was the director of the Peace Corps in Washington. And when I heard the name, it just clicked, and we got it done. And Jeff was my minority investor. We had a little bit of money. The company was doing kind of okay at the time, so we got it started on a whopping investment of $40,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because just thinking about just the hard cost of publishing alone, I
But we
had
had
no
a lot
idea
of the
you pulled it off.
staff
Yeah.
was doing sports car and doing other things, so we had to all do double duty to
Right.
get Racer done. And thankfully there was a need in the market, and it took off immediately. We had immediately sold like 12,000 subscriptions, which wouldn't be an easy thing to do today.
Yeah,
but
right.
back then, and we did run one ad in Auto Week before they
Figured it out.
Figured it out.
and that generated 1,000 subscriptions. So,
I'm sure they were lovely with that.
but so the idea though was to do something at a consumer magazine quality level with higher price and better paper, better design, better photography,
Yeah.
best writers, and that's pretty much been the shtick for Racer since day one.
Right.
One of the things that I always think about with Racer Magazine is the photo spreads you guys have always done, like to feature a car.
Yeah.
And in 2002, a car I worked on got to be featured in Racer Magazine, and I was really excited about that. Was that something that from the get-go, you guys like, we need to do this with the
Yeah.
high-quality photos, bring the car in, make it look absolutely awesome.
Yes, and I'd seen studio photography early on. I was impressed when I was a young guy with the advertising that was done for Ontario Motor Speedway, which was right here. It was a replica of Indianapolis Motor Speedway near where Auto Club Speedway now is. And they used studio photography of racing cars on billboards. And I just, especially the down shot. They had a down shot of an Indy car where you're above it looking down where it looked like a spaceship.
Yeah.
So that had always stuck in my mind. And then I saw a Japanese magazine called Racing On where they were doing something similar. So about probably the first few months of Racer, we got it stable and said, let's find a way to do this. And Rick Graves, who's a great talent, was a photographer with a studio nearby. We started working on figuring out how to do it. We found a couple other people that could help us when Rick wasn't available. And I think the first car was Jack Baldwin's Hot Wheels Camaro.
Oh,
was the very first car we ever did, which is a cool race car and Trans Am car.
Yeah.
And it's a signature element of what we do. And it's what I think one of the things we're known for.
Yeah, as a mechanic at the time, because I'd only been racing like amateur stuff. That was like a moment in my career.
Yeah.
You know, I was like, oh my God, a car I get to work on is going to be the featured racer mag.
Well, it's kind of like it's again, racing pornographers where it's our Playboy centerfold. Although we're going to have to follow Playboy's lead and not take the body panels off going forward after March.
Right. I read it for the articles.
I read it for the technical analysis.
Right, exactly. I need the specs.
So with the publication today, as far as the balance between print versus what's online, the economy of print is obviously very, very different from how it was 10 or 15 years ago. So how is that adjustment working for you guys in terms of trying to make it all come together?
Well, I think I'm happy to say, knock wood, that Racer itself has never been financially healthier as a title. That's because it was incredibly unhealthy and unstable for most of the time we published it, and only during this year has it really been able to stand on its 2 feet, and that's just because we now have a much more holistic approach to everything else attendant to it.
Right.
And the online side's vibrant and growing, and we don't produce it on a monthly basis in the winter, because there are not enough advertisers to support it in the off season. And one of the things that we did when we came back is we raised the subscription price and lowered the number of issues. Now, it would sound like that's a recipe for disaster.
It does, yeah.
Right. But the circulation actually went up because we delivered a much higher quality product, and people will pay for quality, and they just the design paper alone, you can feel it's a great magazine. But what Lawrence Foster, our editor-in-chief, puts into that magazine, I don't think you find anywhere else. And our designer, Rob French, is based in the UK. He was with us here, and his wife got transferred back there. He was a Haymarket employee.
Okay.
We realized we don't need to have him here. He can do this anywhere. So we have this great team that produces this magazine above the standard of the market.
Right. Has the ability to do things remotely changed the ability to do it? I mean, a lot of your reporters are all over the country. And
it's great. Yeah, we have a nice office, beautiful office, and I think it's only got 22 workstations in it. We've at any given day, with interns included, we probably have 14, 15 people there.
Right.
And we don't ever see that changing because of the ability now to have remote salespeople, remote web people, remote editors, remote designers. Sports cars designed in Georgia. Right. That's where our art director moved. Her husband now is the general manager. Operates the operations side of Road Atlanta. So but we see that the wave of the future is that we have to have one coordinating central hub.
Right.
But we can be anywhere in the world.
So it's a pretty small office of people right now.
It's when I left the building when we sold the company in 2001. I stayed for a while, but I left in December of 2005. We had 35 people sitting in the office. And I think we just hired a new sales associate, so we have 13 people in the office, and then we normally have 2 or 3 interns working with us.
Sure.
Which is a source for us for potential long-term talent.
Right.
Yeah. We know a couple.
Yep.
Who are both fired.
But we've been very fortunate. We have excellent interns. So, but it's a much smaller staff doing really the same amount of work that we used to have 35 people doing. And that's technology, and that's the ability to work with people on contracted basis. most of our reporters are contracted. We agree to a fee on a monthly basis
Yeah.
for the year, and so that's how we do it now.
Nice.
So with all that going on, are you still able to keep up with Pfanner Communications? Do you still have a
Yeah.
big clientele on that side as well?
We do, and it's coming back because I had to focus so exclusively on Racer. We have several client projects, and that's really a consulting business where we develop strategy, positioning.
And again, to put this in perspective, this is Pfanner Communications, which is a separate business that you own,
Right.
which does a lot of sort of marketing and sort of consulting services for a bunch of people in the automotive field.
Right, automotive and racing
Yeah.
business. And Pfanner is the old, it's a rebirth of the original business. And the original business was started in '79. Doing that work, one of our first clients was Skip Barber, where we did the brand identity and the visual identity for the school and helped create basically the whole brand positioning and premise. Skip's, one of my longest standing friendships. And he did a great job, by the way, getting a lot of people to go race. But
Yeah.
and we continue. We've been doing a number of client projects this year, and I would imagine next year we've got a few irons in the fire that would be significant, and I can now breathe and focus on some of that business because we have a stable overall business in racer media and marketing.
And these names aren't small companies. These are Porsche North America, Penske Motorsports, Toyota Motor Sales, Honda.
Yeah.
Heard of that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Really great, awesome company. The Indianapolis Motor Speedway. So you're talking about really important,
Yeah.
clients, not just small mom and pop teams or shops or whatever. And then you just mentioned the Skip Barber branding. That logo has stood the test of time. It's the most probably iconic racing school ever.
Yeah.
It made Seinfeld, a
Yeah,
small
that's
show
right.
called
Yeah.
Seinfeld.
Do we want to order, by the way?
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah.
I think we're ready to order.
How much trouble has Robin Miller gotten you in?
Tons.
Yeah.
And I loved every minute of it. So, it's one of those things where I respect Robin Miller's knowledge and history in the sport, and he's passionate, he's opinionated, and he has, I use the phrase audience gravity. He is, I think one of the primary reasons the website, doubled in traffic over
Right. He can rattle a saber.
Yep, and both he and Marshall Pruitt have this kind of presence where they're able to, when they post something, it jumps.
Right.
Yep, and that's really our MO going forward, is to have a lot of personality in what we do, and stand behind our contributors. We had a circumstance earlier this year where a sanctioning body was unhappy about our reporting of injury to a driver and the detail in which was reported, which is understandable. It was a circumstance that pushed the limits of what we normally would report, but the circumstances of the injury and the interest in the driver was very high, and we had a respectful conversation with the sanctioning body. I think our team really sat on the story overnight. We had it the day before, and I got to see kind of the professionalism and the commitment and just the humanity in both Robin and Marshall in that process, and our whole company stands 100% behind them. And people have short memories. These are the guys that are there for you all the time.
Yeah.
And when they report something uncomfortable, it's part of their job.
Well, to put that in very specific context, there was a very significant sports car incident last year.
Yes.
And actually somebody who works for you put out a tweet a little premature that on the condition of the driver, and at that time, as I understood it, they were still under kind of what's called the HIPAA lockdown. So
Right.
legally, you can't speak until the
Right.
the hospital clears you. But this reporter had a very reliable source tell him what was actual factual
Right.
information, but he put it out at a time that was premature. And I assume, to an extent, there's some liability if he does something like that.
Well, you can believe me, we've run a lot of this by attorneys, and there's we tend to be very careful about what we put out in terms of what would be considered leaving us legally vulnerable. We work for the readers,
Fair enough.
And I try to remind everyone of that on a regular basis when there's a conflict of interest, because we work with sanctioning bodies, we work with marketing partners. One marketing partner that makes tires doesn't like us pointing out that their tires don't work under certain circumstances.
Don't know what race you're talking about.
But
Yeah.
at the same time, who the hell would ever?
Who wouldn't see this?
Yeah, right.
Right.
It's not. It's not.
And ultimately, what keeps your readers is that you are saying the things that you're saying because you're giving a real approach.
We have to be trusted. So there's
Yeah.
a fine line. I think that with the most recent tragedy that we all faced here, losing Justin Wilson, I think we'd learned from some of the things going on in the past few years, and we took a slightly different approach to it.
Yeah.
And I think in this particular instance, it was profoundly personal for almost every person in our company. Many of us lost someone on a personal basis that we cared deeply about in family. There wasn't the usual emotional distance, and it was a learning experience for everyone. And the grief that I saw, and just the lingering sadness and almost the emotional paralysis at that time, all of it was something I've never seen in 43 years of being involved in racing. So overall, racing's about learning faster and more effectively than your competition, so we never forget that, and nothing teaches you more than that sort of a circumstance.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There was another magazine, actually, just this morning.
We're going.
We're going right there.
Okay.
There was another magazine this morning that there had been an editorial article that was up for a couple of days, and one of the things within that editorial was commenting about the son of a very important stakeholder in the sports car series.
Mm-hmm.
And as of this morning, that section of the editorial is not there anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to assume that there were a couple of angry phone calls from some stakeholders in this series, and thus it's now gone. Have you been in this position, and how do you balance that?
Because to finish that company buys pages in that magazine.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, we've been in that position, and I will say that we've only retracted one story in the history of the company, and that's because we had our facts wrong.
Fair enough.
And it was an honest mistake, and it was an interpretation of TV ratings data that was incomplete.
Okay.
That was unfavorable to
Yeah.
a company we do business with, and favorable to another company we seek to do business with.
Okay.
So rather than get into a pissing contest, we
Yeah.
withdrew it. Now we've had pressure put on to us in similar. I do know what you're talking about in terms of the.
Yeah.
And if it's true, and our reporter did their job, we'll suffer the consequences of whatever retribution will come
Where
from the
that
company.
because you're affiliated with this guy.
Right,
so,
and we, not that they're related, but there was a circumstance
yeah.
where we produced the magazine for the Sports Car Club of America, and the son of a sponsored driver had a unhappy relationship with the stewards at an event and was disqualified in all of those pages.
One of the recurring themes that we do on the show is we ask a question from the previous guest to the current one. And Jeff Brown's question for the Speed Freaks was, what would you do to change, if you could change one thing in motorsports, what would it be?
Right.
And then he answered his question. He said, I would cut downforce and grip level by 50%. And not only because he wants to see it, but he thinks it would also bring back interest in the sport.
It would, and the first time I met the guys from Formula Drift, Jim Law and Ryan Sage, they came to the racer office to basically ask advice. We had a person working with us, Rodney Wills, who was our associate publisher, who really was a youth culture influencer, and had a great meeting, great conversation with them. And when I saw what they were doing, I thought, wow, this is fantastic. And then I showed them pictures of my heroes, Jimmy Clark, Dan Gurney, Cornelli Jones, sideways in race cars, and there was this immediate click, and it's different, but the appeal is the same. And I think that where we've gotten lost is this chase of this technical excellence of launching a car off a corner, this mechanical supremacy and engineering supremacy that is absolutely boring to watch.
yeah, exactly.
And the driver is the emotional connection for most people, the car is a way in. It's an interesting participant. It's not a parody appliance. It's a participant in motorsport. The car is, the people who created are. But what they're making is increasingly irrelevant to generating interest and passion. And but that said, I watch a World Endurance Championship race and seeing the cars at COTA last year. And, oh my God, those cars were spectacular. But they looked like they were being driven at the absolute limit, and they didn't look particularly stable. They looked at absolutely
Any minute it could go wrong.
Yeah.
Now, do you think that's something that you had to see in person
Yes.
because it wouldn't translate to television as well?
Well, although I do see videos from testing, and I do see videos from Le Mans where it does look hairy. They look fast. The closing rates and so forth, they're but I think that there are layers to motorsport. That's an aspirational layer at the very top, like Formula One. In some way, it now challenges Formula One.
Right.
As they are more technically sophisticated, I think, than a Formula One car by a mile.
Yeah.
And but I have a fantasy that one way to solve some of IndyCar racing's problems is revert to the one thing that an IndyCar was before 1970, which is take the wings off.
Right.
Just take the wings off.
Yeah.
Don't allow any external airfoils on the cars, and put them back in a world where you really are a four-wheeled Rossi trying to figure out how to get that thing through a corner where you can't flat it.
Right.
Yeah.
You have to drive it.
Yeah, and when you see these racetracks and race cars where it basically is an engineering exercise to get the car flat everywhere.
Whoopee.
Yeah. That worked really well for the IRL, didn't it?
So selfish curiosity, but back to Pfanner Communication. So, with my business at Media Barons, it's somewhat similar and obviously not as high profile what we do. Certainly not as respected. But the constant challenge that we have is twofold. It's we're always competing with somebody's 22-year-old nephew. We can make that video. Oh, my 22-year-old nephew can do that too, and all of a sudden that's easier than comparing quality. And obviously technology is making this stuff a lot more accessible to do. So whereas in the past we maybe could charge to do a webcast for somebody can now argue, I could just do it on Periscope.
Right.
And as you guys go more towards that, how do you on your end stay competitive?
Well, just really, we don't let ourselves be defined by a 22-year-old with Periscope. If somebody wants that, good. They're probably not our client.
Yeah.
And it's a two-way street. You do get to choose who you work with as well as them choosing you.
Right.
And we just want to be great.
I like that. We just want to be great.
I like that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
about as
that's about as complicated as it gets. And now, we did have a failed business, which is trying to do that with video. And we launched
There's a lot of ways to fail in video. I can.
Well, we found all of them, and it wasn't through lack of quality. I think we had an excellent partner in Rick Graves as a producer director.
Yeah. It's tough.
We didn't understand the business we were getting into completely, and we tried to launch an automotive channel called OnCars.com, and we announced it in May of 2008 because it seemed like a great time to do that.
Did you call it a YouTube for cars?
No.
Okay.
No. We
had that pitch. Go on.
It was going to be more lifestyle and just basically like a weekly brace of programming. And
Sure.
we partnered with Jay Penske's company, which was Mail.com, Media Corp at the time, and now it's called Penske Media Corp.
Okay.
And we managed to keep it going until probably 2011.
Still a good run.
But we at one point, we were distributed through his channels, which was an email portal. We had one year we had 45 million views, but there was nobody willing to pay us for those.
Yeah, it's insanely hard to make that work.
And we ended up finding the only way to make money was doing production for car companies.
That's how we've kind of gone the same way. I mean, viewership alone is tough to justify.
So we still do that now. We work with various producers to do that work. And
that's called that's like the Racer Special Projects division.
Yeah, Racer Special Projects, and On Cars now exists in India as a car shopping site, and Jay's company has taken it forward. Yeah, but we did do our first web documentary series. We did a 30-episode series for Mazda called Rev, which we produced every week. We had
that's
a
hard.
4 to 5 minute high quality video, basically looking into the emotional, intellectual, physical, and economic challenges of going racing from the top to the bottom. And we did a series for Jaguar, and that was really cool too. And so we learned a lot, and all of it translates into what we do now.
Which is not video.
Well, we think video is a big part of our future.
Right.
It's just I think, we're seeing the world.
The cost against the value stuff.
Yeah, you still have to be able to get eyeballs on it. So, we look at what Motor Trend On Demand is doing with some interest. Involved in that business is Roger Werner who founded Speed Vision.
Right.
And they're just down the street from us here on Dyer Road is one of their offices. And we're going to watch that because that's a real indicator to us of
where that kind of market can go.
because I think they want to be the automotive Netflix. And Rogers secured a lot of the rights that were originally held by Speed and Fox for the various race series around the world. But,
My waffle is more important than this podcast right now.
it's all right.
Are you bigger than this podcast?
Yeah, I am.
Don't answer that. I'm asking you a question.
But one of the things we learned about with the video is there's nothing like video to convey the pure emotion of motorsport to people.
Right.
And video does a really good job too of
Who does it best? And Magnus is your only answer.
who?
He's
No,
like,
I think you guys. I do think that
you've never heard of Magnus.
I
Stop
have heard of
lying.
Magnus, and I almost photobombed something you guys were doing once at Daytona, but
That would have been epic.
I would have respected you for it.
but what I like about it is you convey a personality in what you're doing. You've got an attitude you bring to it, and attitude is brand. And most people try to conform to that Dockers. I'm wearing Dockers today, sorry, but that Dockers wearing.
We can't actually say Dockers on the air. We're gonna have to bleep that out.
I'm dressed exactly like the stereotype. I'm
An Orange County white guy.
an Orange County white guy.
No.
But this very conservative, polite, afraid to offend anyone brand that you find,
Sure.
in most post-race interviews. Sure. We're just on the other side of some big changes in media and in motorsports, and they're intertwined, and how people consume sport and how people consume or how people engage in it is being transformed on a daily basis. And racing will learn. I mean, it's interesting to hear Bernie now starting to realize he has a problem, and if you look at racer.com today, he's starting to admit that there are issues.
Nice.
He's only going to be a billionaire
Yeah.
instead of a trillionaire.
Yeah. Tough life.
But I think that the things he is understanding is the sport could be more engaging than it is, and it's not currently. It's it's become you go to a Formula One race, sadly, and you are held at such distance from what's going on, and it's by design. I think it's class stratification.
Right.
You're in steerage.
Yeah, exactly. I was just at COTA right after Petit Le Mans, where I showed you that photo from, and they were already setting up all the stuff for the F1 weekend. This is 2 weeks ago now, and they're blocking off all the places you could see if you were just walking down one of the sidewalks or whatever, because they don't want you to be able to see anything except from where your specific seat is.
Right.
Which I think sucks for road racing, because part of the
Yep.
enjoyment, at least of endurance racing or even IndyCar racing, is that you can watch turn 1 and then walk up to turn 2 and then go down to turn 5 and sit in the grandstands at turn 6 and really take in all the different viewpoints plus the people and all that goes along with it. So I coached at Montreal a couple years ago in the Porsche Cup race that was supporting F1,
Right.
and I couldn't even get in the grandstands to spot during the Porsche sessions with my hard card.
Yep.
I just thought, wow, this is like really restrictive, and that's not what I would want.
Yeah, but I think that the Formula One mentality is from another century before the proliferation of basically media access through direct distribution of content, and just the mindset of everyone being in control of their experience and accessing whatever they want.
Right.
So it does need to evolve. I have sympathy with a Formula One promoter. They have to follow the guidelines of that Bernie lays down.
Yeah.
I found that the people at CODA, they have a business to run, and it's a challenging business given the economic environment in which Formula One operates.
Yep.
So I'm all for them selling as many tickets and getting as many people to, buy their packages and show up. But they're almost selling against this tone of Formula One, and now we have Bernie telling us he's not too fond of America.
Yeah.
And we're not the greatest superpower in the world, which again I don't usually think about when I'm talking about racing. But this idea that because we won't, as a government, pay him his tribute to bring that, we won't submit in the same insecure way many nations do to try to prove that they're first world. Well, we are first world. We actually define first world. And we have our own vibrant and healthy forms of motorsport with fan bases and other sports in this country that are different than the rest of the world. And you can't punish us for being different.
Right.
If you want our dollar,
You're going to have to deal with it.
customer's always right.
Right, exactly.
So let's talk some dirt.
If you could punch anybody in motorsports in the face, who would it be? Get away with it. I like that he's actually thinking about it. Like it's a real question.
This is a real,
We asked this to a couple of drivers jokingly, and they immediately were like, oh, this guy. We're like, oh, let's just keep going. How about this? If you could remove somebody from motorsports
like they just vaporize.
and they were put into a nice place somewhere else
Yes.
in a very friendly way.
Sure.
Well, I have two answers, but I'm not going to give it to you.
Okay. We can
Because
bleep
I
it
don't
out.
want to be removed. I know they have power and they can harm me.
Right. Man,
And
that's the worst.
that is how racing runs.
How tall are they?
Season 6, maybe you've retired, you're on a beach somewhere, and then we'll bring you back in, and you can just
Yes.
Like an hour of you
you know,
just
it
like-
could be. Well, actually, they can still have you killed.
Okay. So
One
how
of the
tall?
people actually threatened to kill me, physically threatened to kill me.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, how tall was this person?
He's very short in my estimation.
Okay.
copy.
No,
Keep in
but-
mind, no one's going to listen to
Is
this.
he
but
over
he's-
75?
I'm just going to point out that my nickname for him is Satan. Those
Okay.
who know me
Okay.
will know who he is.
Okay.
We'll find out.
We have ways.
Should we go into the question?
Let's so our good buddy F. Ferris
Yes.
used to
Oh.
work at Racer
Yep.
and promptly fired.
Well, he wasn't fired by me.
Okay, so that was during the Haymarket days.
Yeah, that was during him. I love Efren. He's a great guy.
Okay, but you would never hire him back, obviously. That's a yes. He would never hire him back.
I'm never say never because look at me. I'm a retread.
He's not even willing to say maybe.
Yeah.
Even maybe just
He
never
did.
say
He
never.
did have a Formula Ford at the time, so
Him as a father, how do you think that'll go?
Well, I'm watching it with amusement on Facebook.
You have to get up before 8.
Yeah, he's actually there's someone else in the world beyond him now.
This is going in. This
Yeah,
is
that's
staying in the
absolutely-
interview. Yep.
No, it's a lesson I had to learn.
Fair enough.
Yeah, it was a hard one. What do you do?
Let's talk about social media for a little bit.
Sure.
You guys have a pretty strong presence with Racer on Twitter and Facebook,
Yep.
and Marshall does a really good job with keeping everybody. I know Robin Miller probably doesn't have a cell phone that can get on the internet.
He's got a dial-up cell phone.
Yeah, I believe that.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Have you been in his house? Does he have a rotary?
No,
Does he have a house?
he communicates through telex.
He sends a messenger.
So yes, but Robin's on Facebook.
Is he?
Yeah, he is, man. He's got followers.
Does he post?
He does.
Is it a fan page and he just doesn't
No,
have
it's
to
just
do
to say
anything?
no. I don't think he's a Twitter guy, but Robin's active on Facebook,
Okay.
and
Wow, I had no idea.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So, yeah, he's great. I think he's maybe at the limit of friends he can have. I think you get to 5,000 and then
Right.
start killing them.
Right.
Have you guys ever thought about starting a Robin Miller Twitter account that you just manage on your own and never tell him?
Robin Miller sucks.
Actually,
There we go. Are you auditioning?
No, God, no. You
What are you
trust
doing?
me. You do
What are you
not
doing?
want that.
This could be ours.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
With the social media presence, it's becoming a bigger and bigger thing. Do you guys have somebody that just runs the Twitter account, or is it something that's kind of shared amongst the different journalists?
It's shared, but it's usually driven by the editor of Racer.com, and the editor of Racer.com is Mark Glendenning, but there's support from other people, but because you can't be on it 24/7.
Right.
And but Facebook is again multiple people take the comm, if you will, and run it. We do bring in some interns, basically, to teach us old white guys.
Teach us how to do it, yeah.
Yes, and and we had a group of interns over the summer that really took a deep dive into social media.
Does that ever worry you? That like a 22-year-old is mastering the voice of Racer?
Not at all, because they just teach us some tricks that we may not have come to for at least a decade. And I have a constant reminder. I have twin 14-year-old girls who school me every day with this annoyed, Dad, Dad, don't do that. That's not, and I get this constantly. So I think we're actually going to a mature group of coaches at 22 that probably are just aging out of being relevant to.
Right.
But what I think is fascinating about all social media and even the forums we were talking about earlier is it really drives home the point that these brands are relationships now. They're not just a one-way street where you're spewing content at people. They're interacting with you and your contributors, and you get a real-time reaction, and they lift your story. If it's worth being shared, it gets shared. If it's not worth being shared, it languishes in a low click land.
Yeah.
And we don't aspire to writing clickbait headlines like some sites I know, but we have occasionally fallen prey to it, and we look in the mirror in the morning and think maybe not.
That's something that frustrates me as the race fan, is that when I see a headline that I really want to know more about and I click on it and it's like a hearsay or could be potential.
Right.
But one of the things that really drives me crazy is when someone takes a press release from a team and then writes the press release into a news story when it's not news. It'll be like Dale Jr. excited for next year.
Disagree.
Really?
On the PR side.
Okay.
No, selfishly. Not because as an audience, I agree with you. On the PR side, you craft a release so that a specific message can go out the way you want it to go out.
Right.
Okay.
So when somebody essentially repurposes it, but puts just a few keywords in so it looks like it's a fresh article, it makes you look good,
Right.
Makes their job easier, and it gets the word you want out without it making it look like a copy and paste.
And that's
now,
pretty
that's
much what press
selfishly.
releases are for.
Yeah.
And,
Okay.
and back in the last century, when you were just an embryo,
Yep.
it
So
was
not
very
that long
common.
ago.
Yes, it was very common that press releases formed the foundation of stories because there was just no way you could get, and these press releases would go through the mail and arrive a week and a half after the event actually occurred. But what I think is interesting is that there's this border, this lack of a border between press releases, content marketing, original journalism. It's all sort of blurring into one flow
Okay.
across the media universe. So we're all grappling with how do you differentiate original content from third-party sources or content that you're being paid to produce. And it's an ongoing lesson. We have all three, and we're trying to manage that. And the last thing we want to do is betray the reader. We want the reader, when we have a content marketing story, we want to make sure that it has interest.
And again, to put that in perspective, to stay afloat, you guys get paid to put out certain pieces because you have to.
We have to. I mean,
and-
it's really the way all these companies now function, and it's part of the deal.
Yeah, so from my standpoint, I guess I'm the super fan or the dork, so I read the actual press release from the team, which probably gets emailed to me, and then that afternoon I load up, probably not Racer because I don't think you guys do this as often as other sites, but I'll read basically the same thing I've already read in a little bit different wording, and for me that's frustrating, but I guess I'm not the target audience because I'm reading the raw stuff first,
Right.
generally.
Right, and we have a lot of original content that we produce. Obviously, we're trying to do more as we go forward, but it's expensive to do it, and the challenge is always finding the right balance between what makes it a business to keep you around, so you're there next week, and what also allows you to grow this reputation as an authoritative source of original content. And original content is really critical, I mean, for us. And so that's what we're up to now, is trying to find ways to expand that.
So a recurring theme we've been doing on the podcast so far is previous person asks a question to the next guest, and then you'll ask a question of the following guest. So we recently sat down with Eric Valdez. He's from a TV show called General Hospital.
Yep.
Did I do that right?
Yep.
And he's also been on a show called Graceland, and then this year he raced in the Continental Tire Series race at Daytona in a Porsche Cayman. And his question was probably the simplest one we've had so far. It's just, what would it take to write for Racer Magazine?
Talent and a point of view.
Okay, that's it.
Yeah.
That leads into my part of this question, because I've gotten to write a column for you guys this year, and I have no idea if that was something that had to be approved, because Marshall just sent me an email and he said, hey, do you want to write something for us? And I said, sure. And I'm curious, does that actually go past Marshall, or is Marshall, because who he is, you don't have to ask him? You trust his...
We trust him, but the truth is your name was mentioned as a potential columnist, and was also recommended by somebody at the SCCA. We were trying to think of people that brought a fresh point of view to that weren't. We wanted a voice in your series, Probably World Challenge, that wasn't going to simply recite the media events they went to and what they had for breakfast.
Which is funny, because I actually do post that stuff, but from like my way of doing it, like I got to go to the racer party,
right.
Never been there before, and to me that was like, oh my god.
But the way you did it was you took the audience with you rather than say, look at me, how cool I am. Yeah, and I think that that's part of it, but I also think that we're always looking to give, this authentic inside view of what it's like to be a racer. That's the live the life and lead the life of a racer. We want people to dream of being race car drivers. No.
So our next guest is going to be Rutledge Wood
Yes.
from Top Gear USA
Yep.
and NASCAR journalism and all that sort of thing. If anything you could think to ask him, take your time. It can be ridiculous. It can be serious. It could be P-related.
I just wanted to ask him if he could recommend a good place to eat near the former El Toro Marine Air Station.
I can.
And they do a lot of the shooting out there.
Yeah, they do out there. I want to know where he shops for his clothes, and if he had a favorite racing series, what would it be?
Are you looking for a stylist?
Yes, I'm looking.
I
for
would
subs.
make that segment. Rutledge Wood takes Paul Pfanner shopping.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that's a real thing.
Dockers.
Anything you feel like you need to be covering?
I thought we were going to discuss my complete sexual history today, and I'm
We
disappointed.
can.
Yeah,
I mean,
'cause it won't take
that's
very
up to
long.
you.
Well, that'll be the intro.
What's in the garage right now?
My wife's car, because I'm not allowed to park in the garage. Any other questions? It's a Range Rover Sport that I'm not allowed to drive because I'm a terrible driver.
Okay.
Oh, so you and Sean have a lot in common.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Well,
basically,
good
if there's a curb to hit, I'll hit. I hit a curb pulling in here today.
Nice.
Nice.
I've just
Nice. How drunk are you 0 to drunk right now?
No, I'm not drunk. I'm just a terrible driver. People mistaken it
Right.
in the past for me being inebriated. It's just the inability to hold a thought and focus. is
Well,
usually-
someone once told me that you're good down the straights.
That deteriorated as time went on. I started to wander and change lanes as if I were Milkaduno. And
All right. Finally a name. Finally a real name.
anything else you want to ask me that could get me into trouble?
Oh, plenty.
Like, I'm trying to think of a way to. Here's my only 2 personal run-ins with Robin Miller. One was at the Bobby Unser. Was that who got awarded this year?
Yeah, was it this year at the RRDC?
Yeah. He came wearing like khakis and a sweater, and everyone else there
dressed
was in
up
a
then.
jacket. Yeah, exactly. And that's what they were telling me. Like, oh, he really did himself up. But my favorite story about him is the second time I've had an interaction with him, and Sean was actually there that day at Sonoma for the IndyCar finale. I went to the HPD truck and trailer for lunch, and they had these ribs that were
Yeah, they were phenomenal.
amazing.
HPD.
Yeah.
Let's not spread that because I don't want people crowding the place.
Well, the funny thing is, we're driving
Yeah.
out here, and it just came up. He's like,
We
yeah.
didn't, because we didn't cross paths that day, but
Yeah.
we were both
Not at
aware
all,
of those ribs. Yeah.
But out of nowhere, he just said, yeah, I was there the other day. The ribs. I'm like, those are like the ribs I'm telling people about.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
my favorite thing about it, though, is that Robin comes in and he's got a bucket of French fries that he clearly bought at a vendor They have a full spread of food. He's obviously got access, and he comes in with a bucket of French fries, and he's giving T. Mikhail from Honda a hard time because there's not enough ketchup. And I was like, that's the Robin Miller I thought it would be.
Yes,
Those are my
indeed.
two.
Yeah. And what I like about Robin, he's original and not ashamed to be himself.
Yeah, no, there
And-
was no holding back.
And if parachute pants are ever coming back, he's bringing them
He's
back.
the guy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we've thought about having, we actually did create a T-shirt, the Everything is Awesome T-shirt.
Yep.
But a whole line of fashion, racer fashion, that
Oh, wow.
we use Dress Like Robin Miller
You
as
could
the
make-
catalog.
You could make hundreds of dollars.
Tens.
on this fashion.
Well, we were
Tens of
dozens
dollars.
of
Dozens
dollars.
of dollars.
You could be a dozenaire. But
We're going to go meet up with Marshall Pruitt tomorrow.
Mhm.
Anything you can give us on him that we can get him riled up about?
I just want to make sure all the stories are in for Racer.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's,
like, hey, do your work.
Yeah.
because
Stop eating ribs
you
with
know,
those guys.
I've heard. I thought his first name started with an F for a while when we had all the deadline issues a year or two ago with him trying to write for Racer.com and for Racer Magazine while everything's on deadline, and it was great to realize his first name was simply Marshall.
I copy that.
Yeah, but no, he's awesome. He actually powers a lot of what we do, and he. What I think is great about Marshall, and you can tell him I said this, is that he's right about everything.
Just ask him. Yeah. That's excellent.
Nice.
All right.
All right.
Yeah, I think we've covered quite a bit here. So
Yeah.
Continentals.
And I just want to point out that
Yeah.
Ryan and I didn't have to get up and use the bathroom.
I am not apologetic about what
we
I
just
did
held it.
whatsoever.
Yeah, we
I
just-
know.
we
You
were
guys are professionals, so I'm
polite.
clearly not.
Yeah.
We
But
just-
I could have
you
just
took-
it could have just happened right here.
When you took your phone, I knew you were in for trouble.
It was a bad day.
no, we
Yeah,
just held our line.
All right.
All right.
Well, Continental's got the check.
Great.
I'm finished.
So that is Paul Pfanner. Big thanks to him for taking the time to meet with us. For kind of the level of success that he's at, he's got a very good sense of humor about it, and I give him a lot of credit for just taking the time and kind of understanding immediately what we were trying to do and just kind of rolling with it. So all credit to him. Moving on, we will play this one out with another edition of Stony Springs, my buddy Anthony Lax. The reason we want to play this song is because they have actually a song that's kind of gaining some momentum here in Los Angeles called Don't Let Me Die at Coco's. And Coco's is actually very, very similar to the restaurant that we ate at with Paul. I don't know how well known Coco's is outside of sort of the western half of the U.S. But anyway, here's a song called Don't Let Me Die at Coco's, also on iTunes. Hope you enjoy.
One moment of truth makes up for a whole day of dishonesty. Making peace with blood. Licking your wounds with grace.
Who's Grace?
And learning humble tactics. How to get up, shaking from a stumble before the sun. Oh well, the change we go through. Oh well, the stains we leave on cities. Angry, angry roads bricked with people rolling forward like onions and slaves stretched before you in television pain. Frowns down. Mental, it's fundamental. And the pities in the cities. And the pities mental, in the cities. It's fundamental. Don't let me die at Coco's. Don't let me die at Coco's. Oh, nowhere monkey meets man, and the monkey is a machine in a human form, more like an ape than an ape itself. I need to gamble for my health. One number short on keto. you. Someone will rip it out for you.
Like the 50s, purple wind comes in my window. This is what it said.
Don't let me die of cocos. Don't let me die of cocos. Oh no, where monkey meets man and the monkey is a machine.